parsha of Vayikra, and we are currently learning about the difference between when God inspires us and when we put in the work to earn our inspiration and our connection with God. And what we finished off reading inside was the idea that when God inspires us, which we call an Isra Le'ela, that only affects and touches and inspires which one of our souls? Our godly soul, right? And that's what we read inside on Wednesday. That the godly soul is sourced from what we called Adam on high, supernal man Adam Ha'elyon, and therefore they speak a common language. And when when God gives us the gift of inspiration, it only touches our godly soul. Our animal soul, however, that's what we finished off reading inside, speaks a different language, cares about different things, has different motivations, comes from a different place, and therefore that inspiration does not translate over unless we put the effort in to actually have our animal soul on board in the service of God. We said that is called an Issarusa Dilasata. So the truth is that we're still in the middle of this idea of reading it inside. We've spoken about it a lot outside, and we are in the middle of reading it inside. We ended off on page 28, right? If I'm not mistaken. Does anyone have notes of where we ended up reading inside? Yeah, because I remember saying
it was
Hashem kaner b'fnei avuka. We said that what happens when the godly soul gets inspired, it doesn't change its nature. Its nature comes forth in an experienced way in our body, in our life, in our consciousness. The godly soul is constantly in a state of loving God, desiring to be one with God, desiring to serve God. And that we said is called the ahava mesuteres, the concealed love of the godly soul. Not because it's concealed from the godly soul itself, but because it's concealed from us, from our reality, from our consciousness. The ahava mesuteres in an Isra Le'ela, when God inspires us, goes from being in a concealed state to being in a revealed state. We said this is also called avativis. It's a natural love for the godly soul. It doesn't have to change its nature, put on a different outfit, try on a different identity. It just needs to take the identity it already has, which is that it wants to be one with God, and it needs to come forth. That's what happens in an Isra Le'ela. Now on the top of page 28, the Alter is going to start with the words aval. However, but this is not the case with the animal soul. The animal soul does not have an avativis, a natural love for God, or even a hidden love for God that just needs to come forth. It has a love for itself, for self-preservation, for physical things. And our job, therefore, is to take the inspiration that the godly soul now has in a revealed way and translate that over to inspiration for the animal soul, which, as we're going to see, means speaking in the language that the animal soul is motivated by and understands.
I learned the sikha on this past week's parsha, Emor, and it was talking about this, how you were saying, Yetziat Mitzrayim was an Isra Le'ela, and then the Omer period is Isra Le'ela, us putting in the work and the effort, and then Matan Torah is Hashem then bringing us back in when we're ready for it, in Isra Le'ela, but we did the work and we're ready for it.
Yeah.
So
a lot of the Spirit to Omer, right? Emor, the parsha that we read last week, we got the obligation in the Torah to bring the Omer sacrifice, which was a bali sacrifice, animal food, right? Connected to the animal soul. And right away we get the commandment in the Torah to count the days between Pesach and Shavuot, to count the Omer. And the end of this Maimar is the source for that idea that you read in the Sikha, that you'll see in all different Maimarim. The Alter Rebbe is the one who introduced it first in this Maimar. So that's why I like to. It's the OG of that idea, the original. Okay. Yeah.
So just to clarify, the Isra Le'ela is naturally, it's the one that we don't have to work for?
Yeah. There's kind of two levels of Isra Le'ela. One that just comes suddenly, where God gives us the gift of inspiration, and one that comes as a result of our hard work, where God promises us, if you keep putting the work in, you're going to start to feel something for God. But we're talking here about, Isra Le'ela that happens. Both of them have the same idea, that even if you've worked for it and then you get inspired, that inspiration that you got as a result of the work only touches your godly soul. So it's a constant effort on our part to then bring that over to the other side, to the animal soul. Yeah. But you're right, it's a inspiration or a feeling of connection to God beyond what we have earned on our own. That was gifted to us. Okay, so let's read this inside now about the animal soul. We read at length about the godly soul and the hidden love that comes forth, and that it's like a candle before a big flame that, it's just, put it next to, and I was thinking about it now at Havdalah, because how it literally moves towards the bigger flame, right? That's our godly soul. It's naturally yearning to be one again with God, with its source. And the Esther Shemtov just brings forth that yearning to the forefront of our consciousness. The animal soul, however, we need to put the work in to do that. So page 28 at the top. Aval, however. Again, if you're more comfortable in the English, just follow along on the right side, and in the Hebrew on the left. And stop me if there's a word you want to get down. Aval, however, hanefesh haba'amit, the animal soul, shekvar yarda, that already descended, uklula, and is now made up, mitovara, of good and bad, as opposed to the godly soul that retained its purity even as it descended into our bodies and our lives. The animal soul is now made up of good and bad. Ruba kakularan, majority of its tendencies and natures are actually leaning towards bad. And again, we said bad does not mean evil. It usually means selfish or not seeing its connection and its source to God. Loi shayach bailamark, and we cannot say the same thing for the animal soul as we said for the godly soul, that if God just shines his light on us, it will take this hidden love it has and come to the forefront. It's a different formula for the animal soul. And therefore, even im nimshach isrosat le'ela, if an isrosat le'ela, an inspiration was drawn down, and this word nimshach, by the way, I might have said it before, but this idea of drawing down usually means revealed. Okay, we're not literally dragging something from one world to the next. We're taking it from a concealed state in this world and making it revealed. So even if there's been a revelation of an inspiration from above, this has nothing, no connection to the animal soul. This doesn't move or inspire the animal soul, the haguf, and the physical body.
Is nimshach the same root as mashchin?
Yes, it means to draw down. Although it means to draw, like limshach means to drag or to grab or to. Mm-hmm. So you can draw down or you can draw up. Mashcheni means draw me up. Nimshach usually means drawn down. Mm. But yes, it's the same idea of like
they
pulling.
Use that pasuk for the sikha that way.
Of Mashcheni. Yeah. Beautiful. So yeah, we read that pasuk inside here as well. Ki hagam. It's really nice to see when things connect, right? It's the best. Ki hagam, because although sheruach ha'adam ha'ayla, that the spirit of man, when it ascends, hilamala, it goes up. This is from Koheles, Ecclesiastes. I think that's how you say it in English, by King Solomon. And we see this by the idea that a man, the way that man holds himself is made in the image of his godly side. That's almost like the human side of him as opposed to the animalistic side. Our head is above our heart, right? And we're able to look up. We're able to look up toward that which is higher than us. So the spirit of man naturally goes up, just like the godly soul naturally goes up and yearns for God. Im kozeh, but with all of this, behema, a person is also got an animal side, the yeredus lamata, which goes down. And if you see animals, they are on all fours. Their head is down toward the ground. They're not looking up toward God and transcendence and their source. They're looking down toward their source of food and that which makes sense for them in the moment. So he behema v'yeredus lamata. Ela. So instead of being able to just wait for God to inspire us to move our animal soul, shezeu avodas ha'adam. This is the work of man to change our animal soul. Dafka lavara nafshei habahamis, to refine our animal soul. This is the reason for why the godly soul left its beautiful place in paradise and descended into this world, to refine, to elevate his own animal soul. The nikra, and a person who does this, who takes this seriously, this work, is called Oved Elokim, somebody who serves God. That's literally what it means. But Oved comes from K'may Iris Avudin, like tanning leather. I think we might have learned at the beginning of the year, Maimah, right? That it's not good for man to be alone, about Adam, and we spoke about this idea as well there. K'may Iris Avudim, like tanning leather. Tanning leather is a very, very difficult, arduous, also stinky, literally, like process. And it's not pleasant, but the hard work is incredibly worth it, because what can we make from leather? We can make things like shoes, right? And clothing that protect us. And a human being can't be functional without shoes. There's a book that I used to love reading when I was a kid called The Last Pair of Shoes. I don't know if it's a Jewish kid story book. I just found out recently that my brother-in-law, my husband's sister's husband, okay, so my brother-in-law, his mom wrote that book. So my sister-in-law's mother-in-law. And when I saw it, I was like, I love that book. It's called The Lost Pair of Shoes. It's a beautiful story. I'm pretty sure it's based on a true story about a shoemaker who, during the war, people were coming to him for shoes, and not during in Russia, so like the freezing cold temperatures, he used up all the leather that he had, and he had one more pair of shoes left, and they were for him to be able to go out and cut wood and keep his family warm, otherwise they would die. And then there was a man who came over to him begging him for shoes. He said this was his last pair of shoes, and how they would take turns to wear the shoes. And it's like, I don't know, I always loved the story as a kid. And so I was seeing Iris of wood in here, that like tanning leather is a very difficult, unpleasant process. But if you do it, then you can have shoes. Shoes enable a person to go way further than he could have without the shoes, right? To actually be a person, to fulfill his mission in the world, to take care of his family, etc. And so too, this is the idea, this is the analogy that's brought for working with the animal soul. It's a stinky process. It's not pleasant. We have to face ourselves and our insecurities and our traumas. And in doing so, we actually fulfill the mission, the reason for why we're here. So that person who does this is called Oived Elokim, like Iris Avudim, like Oived from the word Avudin, which means to tanning leather, taking dead animal skin that's seemingly useless and turning it into something useful. Shemabed Oisan Masakan, that he tans them, he processes these skins, and he fixes them up. And that's really what we are doing with our animal soul, and that is what we call it Isurusa de la Sata. When we put the work in, we put the effort in to bring our animal soul on board. And now another quote from what we call the revealed Torah Nigla for the Chassidic idea. This is a constant that you'll see. When there's a new Chassidic idea brought, the Alter Rebbe will always tie it down to something in what we call Nigla, in the Gemara, in the Tanakh, etc. Ukamai Marazal, as our sages say in the Gemara Maseches Nida, the Malech, about the angel, Hamamune al Harayon, who was appointed over pregnancies. So, hello, good morning. There's an angel who sits up on high and says, oh, that soul I'm going to match up into that woman's body, right? And that I'm going to give to that couple. And that soul I'm going to give to that couple. And Sheshayel, this angel asks, oh, this soul that I'm about to bring down into the world, Tipazu, this drop, Matehele, what will it be? What will be with it? Will it be rich? Will it be poor? Will it be here? That's the examples it gives you: strong or weak, wise or simple, right? What's going to be with this potential life? The ilu, however, tzaddik or rasha, like Amar, it cannot say, will this be a tzaddik? Will this be a rasha? Why? Because that is up to us. That is not something that's dependent on high, on God's light and inspiration. That is dependent on us. The zeu ki yakriv mikem. This is why the verse in Vayikra that we're learning says Ki Yakriv mikem, when God will bring close mikem, from among you. Klamar, to say lashon mikem, the word mikem hainu is referring, means hanefesh elokit levad, the godly soul alone. When God brings us close, when we get an inspiration from on high that we did not earn, that changes and inspires, not even changes, that inspires and brings forth the godly soul. Aval, however, korban chem, your sacrifice, your response to that inspiration, you bringing yourself close to God, who min ha-behema, has to come from the animals. Right? The verse continues. Adam Ki Yakriv mikem, korban la-Hashem. When God inspires us and brings us close, meaning when God inspires and brings forth our godly soul. Right here?
Sorry, let's start with you, and then...
So
I'll hear you.
Okay.
Can I phone with you? I'll
There.
cover it.
Okay, amazing. We have a birthright group coming in
So you need
for a taste of Jewish learning, and there's 40 kids, so wish me luck. 40 not kids, adults. The way that the birthright heads talk about the birthright college, the kids, I'm like, how old are they? But anyway, so yeah, wish me luck, 40 of them. Okay. So the continuation of the verse, after saying Adam Ki Yakriv mikem korban la-Hashem, man in singular, which we said is referring to God, when he brings us close, we then respond with korban chem hu min ha-behema, with responding, initiating our relationship with God from the animal part of ourself. I know this means levar hanefesh haba'ami, to refine the animal soul, lihiyas bevchinas iskafia ve'eshatcha, to be tamed, reined in, and transformed. How does this happen? This transformation happens through contemplating B'Gdulas Hashem, about the greatness of God, according to how his understanding is able to handle it, according to what his mind is capable of. And this is very important. This is very much what I was going on a tangent about, that when we want to bring our animal soul on board to God, we need to talk the language of what it cares about. So we need to get to know, as we're going to see in the next chapter, what is my animal soul made up of? What does it care about? And how can I convince it in its own language, through its incentives, that the best thing for it is to serve God? And then after we really contemplate and believe this in our mind, we can give birth to Ava Aza, to a very powerful love, even from the animal soul, that the animal soul should care about God, should love God, should be passionate about God. But that can only happen if we take the inspiration God gave us in our godly soul and then speak to the animal soul in the language it understands, to explain to it that from a physical level, from a selfish place also, serving God is good for it. However, first, there needs to be iskafia, there needs to be reining in. We said iskafia literally means to bend. We need to rein in the animal soul. Before you can talk to the animal and teach it and train it to take you where you want it to take you, like the horse we said, right? And using the incentives of the carrot and the stick, you need to literally first rein it in. If it's running around and trying to get out, and then you can't even communicate with it. So step number one in this communication process is reining in the animal soul, training it not to just be ruled by its anxieties and its worries and its tendencies and nature. With the three garments of the soul, the three expressions of the soul. Machshava, with its thoughts, dibor, its speech, umaaseh, and actions. Besur meirach, by staying away from bad, va'aseh tov, and doing good. Step number one in the process of communication with our animal soul, of what we call Israsa de la Sata, is to rein in the animal soul. If we, while allowing our animal soul to pursue all of its urges, are at the same time trying to convince it that God is the best thing, it's not going to work, right? It's like letting the horse run free while trying to keep up with it and saying, by the way, here's a carrot. maybe you'll come and take me where I want to go. First, you need to rein it in. Then you can communicate with it, and then you can transform it. And then afterwards, after you've done this, you will come to the level what we call transformation, where the animal soul wants what the godly soul wants. It doesn't just follow. It's not just trained to listen to orders and to obey, but rather it now wants that connection with God, which you said is possible because in its source, that's where the original passion for the animal soul comes from the angels that are passionate about God. And that is the end of chapter 2. And that's really what we just read inside a lot of what we spoke about last week. Like that's almost like can sum up what we spoke about last week. Any questions or comments on this part, this section?
Could you speak more about that kind of, I think the reining it in, like that was like, I mean, that's still different for everybody, but in a more like general way, is there any way to like maybe just control those like urges like that you were talking about?
So iskafia, and this reining it in, literally means what we call self-control.
Mm-hmm.
Self-control. And it's the tiniest moments. And we spoke about iskafia. Iskafia are not these big, grand gestures for God. They're tiny moments where in that moment, my animal soul has an urge to do something according to its nature. And we say, you know what? I'm not going to do that right now. And it's usually the tiniest, minuscule microsecond of a decision where we prioritize God over its urges in the moment. And that, when we do that again and again and again and again, that gets the animal soul to a place where now it can actually sit down at the table, at the negotiating table, and actually listen. Because until then, there's no way to try and communicate with the animal soul and explain, and in prayer, right, if your whole day looks like giving in to all the urges and indulging in the animal soul all those mini seconds throughout the day, you're going to get to prayer in the morning, you're going to try and tell the animal soul how God is so great, so great for the animal too. It's not there. It's not there. It needs to first be reined in. And so what that looks like is very individual. But the most important thing to remember is that it's tiny, tiny moments. It's not grand things like, sometimes you think of people want to change the way they eat, right? So self-control, we think of food sometimes because we're women. It's unfortunate, honestly. Everyone has gone around there, but
it's okay. We're just making us better looking than men.
Yeah, I guess so. I think, and so when it comes to, we think, okay, that's it. I'm not touching this food ever again, or I'm not touching this whole category of things. The whole day, it's like, no, that's a big gesture. A lot of health comes from the tiny little decisions that we make throughout the day, right? And that's what actually makes it attainable as well and feasible. And that's where the change comes from. Because when we make these grand gestures, we're not really changing inside. And so that's iskafe, that's what that self-control is. It's the Alter Rebbe breaks it down. He said, Machshava, Dibur, V'Maaseh, the way we think, we can control. Our subconscious, we cannot control. Our inner emotional world, we can't necessarily control what's going to show up. But the way we think, the way that comes forth into conscious thought, we can control.
Having like a negative self-talk or something like that is the way that we can change ourselves, probably by thinking no, I'm not thinking, I'm not going to be mean to myself, I'm going to be nice. And
100%. Yeah, 100%. Not letting the animal soul take the reins of our thought, and that the anxiety that the animal soul naturally has because it's in charge of keeping us alive, that should hijack the way we think, that should hijack the way we express ourselves and communicate, and that should hijack the way that we show up literally in action.
Thank you, Esther.
Welcome. What we're going to do now in chapter 3, and again, I don't know when exactly I have to pop out, but we'll start. Chapter 3 is very short, so that's why I know when you heard that there's 5 chapters, you might have gotten overwhelmed, but actually chapter 3 is really a few lines. The Alter Rebbe is going to elaborate on this idea of communicating with the animal soul and bringing it on board. Based on the verse, we said that the verse says, Adam Ki Yakriv mikem korban la Hashem. And we said that we're translating that as when God, Adam Ha'elyon, brings us close, Ki Yakriv, korban la Hashem, as a korban. Now, he brings us close to him. We respond, that's the Esther Shemtov, then we respond with the Esther Shemtov, min ha-behema, we respond with our animal. And then it doesn't just say min ha-behema in general, but then it says min ha-bakar or min ha-tzon. From the ox, I guess you would call bakar, cattle, but cattle is very general. Bakar is referring to specifically cows, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we would call it cows generally. Min ha-bakar or min ha-tzon from the sheep, right? So goat and sheep, I think, would fall into the category of sheep, and then the different bulls and cows would fall into bakar. And why did the verse have to elaborate on which type of animals? Behema means domesticated animals. That covers the whole thing. The Alter Rebbe is going to say that this has a message as well. In giving us the different categories of animals, the message is that we need to actually get to know our animal soul, because not every one of our animal souls is alike and is the same. And we need to know, is my animal soul more like a cow, more like an ox, like a bull, or is it more like a sheep? And once we know that, then we can know where I actually need to put the work, right? Because we can decide, I'm going to have self-control today. Okay, well, where? Am I somebody who's super, super meek? And I say, no, I'm going to have self-control. I'm not going to blow up at somebody today. It's good job, right? Not so impressive, right? Am I somebody who doesn't care about physical things? I'm just detached. I'm just an intellectual. I'm going to say, I'm not going to give in to all my cravings. Good job. That's not you. That's not where you need to put the work in. So before actually deciding I'm going to put the work in, I'm going to have that self-control, you need to know who you are and what needs to be worked on. And that takes getting really honest with ourselves and taking a real good look at ourselves. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is going to say in chapter 3. That's what he's teaching us. That's why the Torah elaborates on which type of animal specifically we're bringing as korbanos. Because we all need to bring all the different animals within us, all the different aspects of ourselves, the animalistic tendencies to God. And that's not going to look the same for each of us. So, Gam Pirush min ha-behema. Another explanation for when we say that we need to bring our animal, Hainu hamavor la'el, based on what was previously explained. Shekadei lahachnia, that in order to subdue, ulevar, and to refine, nefesh ha'ba'amit, the animal soul, who dafka al yadei shorsha, that this specifically needs to happen by bringing back to its source, umakora, and the place where it comes from, mebechinas pnei shar, sheba merkava, from the level which we call the face of the ox of the merkava. So we started off the beginning of Adam Ki Yakriv talking about the source of the animal soul versus the source of the godly soul. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to just repeat that for the next 3 lines over here. that we remind the animal soul where it comes from, and we said that that is essential for two reasons. First of all, we need to know our animal soul, as he's going to elaborate here. The second explanation, and the way that he explained it at first, earlier in the mimer, was that we need to remind the animal soul of where it comes from. Remember that our animal soul is not inherently bad, but rather it's just misguided. It's as it descended into this world, it started off as an angel that was totally in love with God, and it got lost. It lost its direction, got lost in translation, as you can say, as it descended down into the body. So v'zeu shemaskirin b'shtayim lefanei. This is the reason that we mention in the two blessings before the Shema, the Kriyat Shema, or the reading of the Shema, איך שהמלאכים והחיות הקודש, how the angels, makdishim umamlichim, how they sanctify God and they say God is our King, and in doing that we remind our animal soul that it too, in its source, sanctifies God.
From the Tanya yesterday.
This was the Tanya yesterday?
Yeah.
Beautiful. I did not actually read the Tanya yesterday. You want to share what did, like this exact idea?
Yeah, it was. I mean, like it was talking specifically about the blessings before Kriyat Shema, how like it's all about like how the chayos, like the animal angels, were like so connected to Hashem and like praising Hashem, but like there's like different levels of them. So some of them could say like kadosh, kadosh, kadosh because they really like could feel the holiness, and then the other ones,
The Ophanim, are the lower ones.
were lower, so like
Yeah.
they couldn't like really like see the revelation of His holiness. So they say Baruch
They say Baruch Shem
Shem
B'Makomo, right?
Yeah.
In the blessings before Shema, right? So there's the chayas, which are higher, and the lower ones, and it says that they noisnim reshus zelazeh. They talk about it, that they give permission one to the other. They like teach each other how to praise God. They give space one for the other. This is all the things that we're mentioning in the prayer before Shema. But you could say, how are these blessings for Shema? Shema talks about loving God and that God is one. What's that got to do with the angels as they're praising God? And the answer is, in order to actually have a correct Kriyat Shema, where we proclaim God's oneness and we proclaim our love for God, we need our animal soul on board. And to get the animal soul on board, we need to remind the animal soul of where it comes from. That this is not this foreign thing that has nothing to do with it, but that it started out as an angel who, and look what the angels are doing. Like literally pointing, saying, look what they're doing. This is where you come from. This is who you are.
And then it was like talking about how like even like the angels are in such a high level close to Hashem. Like then we say the bracha of like Avas Olam, because really what Hashem wanted was that He would have His people, His nation that He loves, and would choose Him instead of like having no free will, like that we are even on a higher level than the angels.
Wow. And that we choose God as we are, like,
and that He chooses us, like He loves us so much.
Wow. So hopefully you have what to take into the Kriyat Shema today or tomorrow if you're really happy. Beautiful. Robin, did you have a question? No, I thought that you were about to say something.
The blessings on the Shema, I really haven't been getting. I've been reading it, but like I don't get it. And this pit that you were just talking about, like passing the yoke from each other and all that, it's just kind of like tangled. Like what? So
like that they give permission to each
other.
Like I
just don't.
Yeah.
So you're just touching on something where you're like,
explained,
what is this about? But that's okay. We don't need to like.
I'll elaborate on it for a second.
Sure.
That angels are like animals. Animals have one type of nature, and that's it, right? And I always bring the story of the Rambam, where the philosophers had a big argument. Can animals change their nature? And they said yes. They took kittens, who and then they put mice, and they were serving all the food, and crash, they went after the mice, right? Animals, by definition, have a nature, and they're defined and limited to their nature, and the same is true for angels. That's why the angels are called chayos. Animals are sourced in the angels. Angels have a specific nature. Some angels have a nature of loving God. Some have a nature of fearing God. They each have their own stamp, and they can't get out of that. So the idea of noisnim reshus zelazeh is that in order for them to all unite and serve God as one, as a whole, unit of angels, they have to share with each other, allow each other to go into the other's domain. That Michael, who serves God with ava, with love, should actually also be able to serve God with yira, with fear and awe. That Gabriel, who serves God with fear and awe, should also be able to proclaim, to serve God in that moment when they're all together with the love as well. That's the idea. A human being has 10 spheros, has all the different natures, and has the ability, therefore, to transcend his nature and to and to not be defined by just one nature. But the angels are like animals, so that's why they need permission from each other to be able to like go out of what they are to all come together and serve God as a whole. That makes sense. A little bit, a little bit more. All right. So this, what we're reading here, the Alter was going to say there's another explanation for this idea of knowing that our animal soul is an animal. So the Krishma is from this specific contemplation, the animal soul will become excited about God. This is the idea that from the animal you will bring yourself close. This means from reminding your animal soul that it started out as an animal, as an angel that has the face of an animal, right? And we discussed what that looks like, right? Not actually, but a spiritual likeness of the face of an ox. That in doing that, we can get the animal soul on board. Now the Alter was going to analyze another part of the verse, which is the fact that it doesn't just say from the animals you will bring yourself close, but it elaborates from the sheep, from the ox. What is that coming to teach us? The explanation for what it says from the here it translates, you're right, Nomi, as cattle. From the cattle, which is referring to cows, and from the sheep and goats. This means there are two general categories of animal souls. There's two general categories. In the Tanya, the Alter actually brings four. He says corresponding to the four elements of fire, water, air, and earth. Thank you. Fire, water, and earth, that these are the four tendencies of the animal soul. Fire is passion and anger. Water is desiring physical things, right? Water is the source for all physical pleasures. Air is arrogance and boasting and feeling superior. And earth is laziness, depression, and heaviness. These are what we would call coping mechanisms, if you want to put it that way. The animal soul comes into the world and it does not feel its connection to God anymore. As it descended, in its source, it felt that connection. As it descended, that feeling of trust and oneness with God has been lost. So it comes into this world and it feels very afraid, very alone. I have to figure this out all by myself. And I have to stay alive. And I don't believe that I come from God, that God is taking care of me at every moment. And therefore, I develop coping mechanisms, right, in order to actually deal with this and survive. And those would be the four general categories that the Alter Rebbe brings in the Tanya. And here, the Alter Rebbe brings it in two general categories of bakar and soin. Okay? Yesh mi shehu b'v'chinas bakar. There are those who are called on a level of bakar. Kishar nagachu, because it says about ox that it's like a goring ox, right? What do they say? A bull in a china shop? You heard that expression? Yeah? Maybe I'm old and I know that expression. No? A bull in a china shop is saying like someone was so angry, they're like a bull in a china shop. Like imagine an angry bull, it's just going to crush everything in its way, right?
Like the most hangry you've ever been, and you have to like go into like your parents' house and they're like, nobody talk to me.
So that's a bull in a china shop. And actually, my mom's into star signs. My star sign is a Taurus, which is a bull. So yeah, I've heard that before. In the China shop. And my dad is also, my other sister's also. So my mom's always like, oh, you guys. Anyway. So that's the idea, that some of us have a nature of what we would call a bull, right? Sometimes they had bullfights and they would get the bull really angry by waving something, a red flag in front of it, right? So some people, they have a very tough and harsh temperament. This means somebody who's naturally very angry, can get very riled up. Shamida Razun, that this bad character trait, by him is very, very strong and is very difficult to overcome. And so this person's animal soul is called by the name of Bakar, Hashem Haraschanos, on the name of the fact that he's temperamental, that he can get really riled up. So that's one very broad general category. The Yeshmi, there are those who that's not their issue. Like that's not the thing that they need to work on. They don't get riled up and super angry and passionate about things. That would be, you can say, like fire. Yeah. You're saying in the four categories? Yeah. V'yesh mi she'eino yiraschan b'tiva. There are those who are not temperamental, who are not angry by nature. The chelek hara shavai, and the evil within them, and again, the coping mechanism that they need to, not evil necessarily, who hey yosef al taiva. It's that they're they are lustful after physical pleasures, but they like physical things. They like comfort. Okay,
That's the element of water.
that would be the element of water. Yeah. V'husha nafshi habahamasi b'vchinas tzayin, and we would say that this person's animal soul is like the level of a sheep. Sheep are like just chilling, they don't get angry and riled up. What are they doing all day? Eating all day. Keep me comfortable, keep me happy. She'ena nagachim, they don't gore. Adarab, on the contrary, kolam barachmanis, they bleat very, very like, they have this rachmanis, like they make you arouse mercy of them. They have this like very sweet, Ella, so what's the problem with them? Shehem balei taivas, that they lust after physical desires. That's all that they care about, their comfort. Page 35. Hine kol eile, all of these different aspects of the animal soul. And now we didn't bring so many different ones. We brought 2 here, but we can, go from there. We have the 4 that the Tanya talks about. There's this woman I interviewed who talks about the different like coping mechanisms that we develop, and she divides it into 7 broad ones, which are, let's see how many I remember, but things like status. Wow, I really don't remember it now. I need to go and look into it, but it's she has a whole, something called innate health. I don't know if you've heard of it. You heard of innate health? And her company, what's her company called? I have to check. But she talks about this idea that she calls them human, like adult pacifiers. When you're a kid and you're scared, you feel alone, you're crying, you get given something outside of yourself to soothe you, right? That's a pacifier. And then we develop, as we get older, sophisticated pacifiers, ways to calm the inner fear that's within us, that the animal soul is just naturally afraid unless we really teach it that it doesn't have what to be afraid of, because God created it and is creating it at every moment and cares about it, right? And so it develops all these different coping mechanisms, people pleasing and worrying after status, being obsessed with work, being obsessed with comfort and predictability, whatever it is. So she actually goes into 7 different ones there. But here the Alter gave us 2 very broad categories, right? V'zeo shekasov min habakar or min hatzayin takrivas korbanchem. This is what it means when it says, it doesn't just say from the animals, but it specifies the animals to say you need to know which animal you are. You need to get to know yourself. You need to know the areas where you need to work and what your nature is, and that's what you need to rein in. That's the iskafi. All these aspects need to be subdued. And it could be that we have all these different aspects. They just show up and rear their heads at different times, right? It's not like somebody who doesn't get angry for a certain period of life isn't going to struggle with that later, etc. Kol echad, each person, lefima diyada benafshe, based on how he knows himself, mahusay b'tiva, his essence and his nature. Kach yira la kafya midazo, then he will know which specific character trait he needs to bend, he needs to have self-control over. Va'az yiyeh davar hamiskaim, and then and only then will the inspiration he got from on high be something that can last forever. When he takes a real good look at himself, an honest look, and says, who am I? What am I made up of? Where do I need to put the work in? And then actually put that work in. That's when our relationship with God becomes something real, because God has a place to reside within us. We've made space for him. And that's what we would call the Isra de Lasata, and that's what the Alter says is the message of the verse, of the opening verse of Vayikra, before talking about all the sacrifices. That there's a lesson, there's a message that is eternal, that is relevant for every one of us at every time, even in a time where we don't bring physical sacrifices. And that message is that when we get inspired from God, we need to respond by making the effort. We need to respond by making the effort, and that effort looks like actually bringing our whole person on board, not just the part of ourselves that's super swept away by all this exciting, new Torah we're learning, but the part of us that has doubts, that has fears. Now, tomorrow, I had an idea. On Shabbos, I have all my epiphanies because I'm on my phone, and then I get to actually think, right? Thank God for Shabbos, or we would never think. So I had an idea of like an exercise I want us to all do tomorrow to try and actually make this practical for ourselves. So we'll do that. We'll start off tomorrow with that. And then we will continue inside. Well, we're going to continue in chapters 4 and 5. Now, what you learned in the Tanya yesterday, Sophie, is what we're going to read in chapter 4. Connecting all of this, going back to the verse of Mashcheni Acharecha Narutza, and connecting it to leaving Egypt, Pesach, Sfir to Omer, where we are right now, and Shavuot, and saying, where's the Isra Lasata? Where's the Isra Pardon? 2-3 minutes. Okay, beautiful.
I learned in the Sikha.
Right, but I'm saying that what you learned in that Sikha, we're going to learn now in the Minor. That's what we're going to learn tomorrow, or maybe the next day if we do the exercise tomorrow. And then in chapter 5, which is my favorite part of the Minor, honestly, the Alter Rebbe says, what do you do when you need inspiration? Like the work is really hard that we're talking about, this work. This stuff is hard. And sometimes we need motivation. We need inspiration. What do you do then? If you're dependent on auspicious times where God decides to inspire us, what about the times where in order for me today to put my work in, I need motivation? What can I do then? And that's what the Alter Rebbe addresses in chapter 5. Okay, so we will finish this Minor, please God, this week. Okay, good. Thank you for joining us.
I'm not going to be here tomorrow. Do you have anything about that practical lesson you could share for us?
So what we're doing tomorrow isn't a practical lesson. What we're doing is like an exercise where I want us all to kind of take a look at ourselves and see, am I bringing my animal soul on board or not? And taking a look at the parts of ourselves maybe that haven't been given a voice. Because we think that it's a bad voice, that it's a voice that's going to take us down, that the growth that we've had are going to go back if we listen to it. And really the essence, the message of this mimer is that we need to incorporate those voices into our service of God and into our growth. Because if we don't, they're there. They're always going to be there. Exactly. You have to first, and before transforming, the step before that is to listen, is to get to know it, is to communicate and to bring it on board, to convince it that this is good for it. Okay? Have a wonderful day. Wish me luck. I honestly,
Thank you.